A billionaire facing death, a hidden secret from the past, and a sacrificial act that could change lives forever. But is Evelyn ready to face the twists her wealth cannot control? Prepare yourself for a story of lies, redemption, and shocking discoveries. Evelyn had it all. At least, that's what the world saw. A billionaire surrounded by million-dollar contracts and luxury trips, living at the top of her game, or so it seemed. In reality, her mansion was too quiet, the parties were mere social obligations, and her longest daily conversation was with the virtual assistant controlling the lights. Between meetings and negotiations, the emptiness within her grew. Strangely enough, despite all the money at her disposal, it felt like she was missing everything that truly mattered. Time seemed to run faster for Evelyn. The mirrors began to reflect lines that hadn't been there before, and her energy was not what it used to be. But who had time to age when the schedule was packed with corporate twists and turns? Her doctors urged her to get a full checkup, but Evelyn always postponed it. What could possibly be wrong? If something were serious, money would fix it, she told herself, ignoring the signals her health kept sending. Her routine was mechanical. She lived within a rhythm of silent lies. She told herself that life was full, that her career was enough, and that loneliness was a luxury she had grown accustomed to. Her past? She kept it locked away, buried under years of obsessive focus on work. Evelyn knew that facing her choices head-on would be unbearable. So, as always, she chose to look away. Everything began to change the day she reluctantly agreed to a routine medical exam. It's just protocol, they assured her. But the results landed like a punch to the gut. Advanced degenerative disease, with limited treatment options. Evelyn stared at the papers with trembling hands, struggling to comprehend how something so serious had gone unnoticed. For the first time in a long while, money felt insignificant. There wasn't a sum in the world that could reverse this. After the diagnosis, Evelyn spent days locked in her mansion, staring into the void. It wasn't sadness she felt, it was an abyss. She, who had always known the value of every cent, now had to confront the fragility of her own existence. But how? Through medications, surgeries, therapies, and then what? For what? The fortune she had amassed now felt like an irony. It was as if life carried a price that none of her millions could pay. Yet Evelyn was not one to wallow in despair for long. Something within her, a kind of stubborn determination, kept her from succumbing completely. In a rare moment of introspection, she began questioning the true meaning of the legacy she would leave behind. All that wealth, built on years of sacrifices and cold decisions, had to mean something. But what? And for whom? Evelyn knew she needed answers, but they wouldn't come from within those walls. Each passing day deepened her sense of waste. Not of material possessions, but of something larger, something more profound. She began to see that her life, no matter how luxurious, was an emotional desert. Evelyn had always believed the past was best left behind, but now it seemed to nudge her, asking to be revisited. Choices, regrets, wounds she had never wanted to face. But perhaps the time had come. An idea began to germinate in Evelyn's mind, a small, fragile thought that felt like madness. What if she could use the little time she had left to do something truly meaningful? Something that went beyond mansions, contracts, or formal dinners. The idea was simple yet terrifying. Find someone worthy of inheriting her fortune. Not an heir by blood, but someone deserving. It started as a whisper but quickly grew into a certainty. Of course, this decision wouldn't be as straightforward as it seemed. Evelyn realized she would have to leave her golden bubble to find what she was searching for. She would need to understand life far from the pedestal she had always stood on. And that meant diving into a world completely unlike her own. The idea was absurd, maybe even impossible. But Evelyn knew she had no other choice. As she planned her next steps, Evelyn felt, for the first time in years, something akin to hope. It wasn't a romantic hope, but a fierce desire to do something that truly mattered. At the same time, fear began to grow. Fear of making a mistake, of being too late, of uncovering twists and lies she wasn't ready to face. But Evelyn had made up her mind. What she didn't know yet was that this decision would force her to confront secrets, lies, and a past that was far from buried. Evelyn, seated in her leather armchair, clutched the diagnosis papers as if they were a death sentence. Terminal. The word echoed in her mind, almost like an accusation. She ran her fingers over her face, feeling the texture of skin that now seemed far too fragile. The choices were clear: undergo treatments that might prolong her life without guaranteeing its quality, or do something different. Something that resonated beyond money. For the first time, she wasn't seeking an outcome but a purpose. As the clock on the wall ticked away, Evelyn realized her immense fortune, built with such effort, now felt more like a prison. It was all she knew, but also what had distanced her from people. What kind of legacy was this? A life of million-dollar deals but no genuine emotional ties? Something inside her rebelled against the idea of spending her final days locked away, waiting for the end. Evelyn knew she needed to act. One quiet night, with the city's lights spilling through her mansion's window, the idea began to take shape. What if I could find someone who truly deserves all this? She whispered to herself. It wasn't charity she sought, nor a mechanical donation. Evelyn wanted something greater, to find a genuinely kind soul, someone who could turn that fortune into something alive. The challenge seemed impossible, but for Evelyn, impossibility had always been an invitation. When she shared her idea with her lawyers, their skepticism was palpable. Leave your fortune to a foundation, Evelyn. It's the logical route, they argued. But Evelyn didn't want logic. She wanted connection, she wanted impact. What if this isn't about logic? She retorted, feeling a spark within her that hadn't burned in years. It was almost as if imagining this mission was reigniting something she hadn't realized she'd lost. Something she didn't know she'd been missing. The problem was that this search would demand more than she was accustomed to giving. Money wouldn't be enough. Evelyn knew that to find the kind of person she was looking for, she would have to leave behind the golden bubble she lived in. She would need to understand life as it was for those she had never truly seen. And that meant abandoning everything: her luxury, her identity, and the safety her wealth had always guaranteed. Looking back at her life, Evelyn began to see how far removed she had been from any kind of vulnerability. She had always been the woman in control, commanding negotiations and bending the world to her will. But this time, the story was different. For this journey, she would have to learn to be someone else, someone who felt, lived, and struggled like anyone else. The challenge was both terrifying and exhilarating. The following nights were consumed by a mix of planning and doubt. Every detail needed to be thought through: how she would leave her identity behind, where to start the search, and what she would do if she failed. Yet with each doubt that arose, Evelyn found a new determination. It wasn't just about finding someone worthy of her fortune. It was an attempt to find meaning for herself, to reconcile the years she'd lost with something greater. The final decision came when Evelyn saw her reflection in her bedroom mirror. I am more than this, she thought, staring at the tired woman looking back at her. That same night, she wrote letters to her team, announcing an indefinite absence. The mansion's keys, the credit cards, the contracts, all were left behind. Evelyn knew that to begin this journey, she had to free herself from the weight of who she was. The first steps toward the unknown were charged with an almost electric tension. For a woman who had always been defined by money and power, it felt like walking without skin. Evelyn knew that from this moment on, everything would be different. And as she crossed the gates of her mansion for the last time, she felt something new, a mix of freedom and vulnerability that reminded her she was alive. But the question lingered: would she be strong enough to face the world as it really was? The twists awaiting Evelyn were only just beginning, and she had yet to realize that this journey would not only be about finding someone worthy but about confronting the lies she had told herself for so many years. Evelyn had always been a woman of quick decisions. In the business world, hesitation was equivalent to failure. Yet, faced with the magnitude of her idea, doubt began to creep in. She spent hours staring at the walls of her mansion, her thoughts swinging between the urgency of her mission and the fear of failure. The truth was that abandoning everything felt more frightening than facing death itself. The doctors insisted, "There are promising treatments, Evelyn. They might not cure you, but they could extend your life." The argument was tempting, but it came at a price. She knew every extra second would be spent in hospitals, far away from the purpose she was beginning to imagine. Her lawyers also tried to dissuade her. "Evelyn, you don't have to do this. Leaving your fortune to institutions is the logical choice." Logical? The word made her roll her eyes. Logic had never been enough for Evelyn. The following days were marked by an internal battle. The logical part of her mind argued that staying and trying treatment was the safest course. After all, there was a chance, even if small, to extend her life. But what tormented her wasn't the fear of death, it was the fear of not truly living. And the more she tried to rationalize, the more she realized that this decision wasn't about logic, it was about courage. One night, while reviewing business papers, Evelyn was consumed by a painful thought. Even if she prolonged her life, what would she do with the extra time? Continue with endless meetings, managing companies that, deep down, no longer meant anything to her? The question burned in her mind like an open wound. And the answer was obvious, though difficult to admit. The external pressure persisted. The medical team brought new reports, promises of experimental treatments, graphs detailing her slow and inevitable deterioration. "You need to think about your quality of life," they insisted. Evelyn wanted to scream that this was exactly what she was thinking about. But how could she explain that her idea, so bold and unusual, was the only thing that made sense to her now? Still, hesitation lingered. Sometimes she wondered if she was being selfish. Who was she to decide she could transform someone's life in this way? Money could buy comfort but not happiness. What if she made a mistake, giving her fortune to someone who didn't deserve it? The doubts followed her like shadows, whispering fears she didn't know how to silence. One day, Evelyn received a visit from an old friend, one of the few she still kept in touch with. "Why don't you just enjoy what you already have?" he asked, his voice heavy with concern. Evelyn looked at him with a bitter smile. "Because I already have everything, and nothing at the same time." The words escaped before she could think. And in that moment, she realized the decision had already been made, even if she still resisted admitting it. Walking through the corridors of her house, Evelyn felt the weight of everything she had built. The paintings on the walls, the expensive rugs, the windows that offered breathtaking views, all of it seemed empty. It was like living in a palace built on lies, where every object was a reminder of what she didn't have: connection, meaning, love. And for the first time, she began to wonder if she was ready to let it all go. Evelyn knew the next step would be painful. Not because it required financial sacrifices, that was easy. But because it demanded she give up something more valuable, the identity she had cultivated her entire life. Was it possible to let go of who she was to become someone new? This was the true battle, and Evelyn still didn't know if she was ready to face it. The clock continued ticking, and Evelyn felt it was working against her. Hesitation still loomed, but each passing second seemed to push her closer to action. After all, the disease wouldn't wait. Neither would time, nor life. And while doubts still consumed her, Evelyn began to understand that to accept the call, she would have to confront her greatest fears: vulnerability, the unknown, and the truths buried in her past. Evelyn hoped the answer would come from someone else, someone who could guide her, show her the way, perhaps offer words of wisdom to calm her restlessness. But the mentor she sought never appeared. Instead, Evelyn realized that the only voice she could trust was her own. In the silence of the mansion, during sleepless nights, she began to hear something she hadn't in years: her instincts. Depending solely on herself was strange. Evelyn, who had spent her life surrounded by consultants, advisors, and specialists, now found herself completely alone. The decisions she had to make couldn't be delegated, and the weight of that was terrifying. Yet, a new strength began to emerge within her, something that didn't come from her wealth or power but from a visceral need to do something meaningful with the time she had left. The internal journey began in simple, almost mundane moments. Like the day she found an old photo hidden in a drawer of a younger Evelyn, full of dreams, before money had shaped every aspect of her life. That version of herself seemed distant, almost unrecognizable, but something about the image sparked a memory. The younger Evelyn wasn't afraid of challenges. She was a woman who took risks, who believed in something bigger than contracts and negotiations. The first steps were clumsy. Evelyn didn't know exactly how to begin, only that she needed to take the first step. She started by donating clothes, jewelry, and luxury items. It wasn't about alleviating guilt but about shedding the excess that held her back. With every item that disappeared, Evelyn felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It was as if, by letting go of things, she was making room for something she couldn't yet name. Yet the silence continued to scream. Evelyn realized that, while she was moving forward, the doubts hadn't completely disappeared. On some nights, she wondered if she was ready for this mission or if she was simply running away from the reality of her illness. The lies she told herself returned with full force, testing her resolve. But Evelyn had already decided there was no going back. Memories of the past began to invade her thoughts more frequently. Evelyn remembered a version of herself she hadn't seen in years. A young woman in love, full of hope, who believed in love and the goodness of people. Where had that woman been lost? To money? To power? Evelyn wasn't sure, but she knew that to move forward, she needed to reclaim part of that essence. In one of her most introspective moments, Evelyn found herself writing. Not reports or contracts, but loose words, almost like a diary. For the first time in decades, she put her fears, doubts, and even her anger on paper. It wasn't easy to confront so many truths at once, but each line she wrote felt like a step toward what she was searching for. Evelyn was rediscovering herself, slowly and painfully. Curiously, the decision to trust her own instincts brought a kind of relief. It was liberating not to depend on anyone but herself. Evelyn began to realize that, although the path was uncertain, she wasn't completely lost. There was something inside her, a gut feeling, perhaps, that was guiding her. And with each passing day, that inner voice grew stronger. Still, Evelyn knew she couldn't rely solely on thoughts and emotions. She needed a plan. So, she began mapping her next steps, how to blend into a simpler life, where to search for genuine people, and what she would do if she failed. The fear was still there, but now it was accompanied by a quiet determination. Evelyn didn't know what she would find, but she was ready to discover it. As Evelyn made her final preparations to leave her old life behind, a question began to arise. Not about what she was leaving but about what she might find. And if the world outside the bubble she had always known was even more challenging than she imagined? She knew the answers lay on the other side of the door she was about to cross. With the faint light of dawn illuminating the mansion for the last time, Evelyn stepped through the iron gates that had symbolized security and power for decades. That night, they were just barriers she needed to leave behind. The suitcase she carried was small, almost insignificant. Inside, only a few essentials. Nothing that could hint at who she truly was. Thus began her new life, not as Evelyn the billionaire, but as an ordinary woman, anonymous, ready to face the unknown. Her initial destination was a modest neighborhood far removed from everything she knew. The taxi that took her there felt like a portal between two worlds, as the scenery shifted from sleek modern buildings to narrow, worn-down streets. Evelyn watched silently, her heart weighed down by uncertainty. When she stepped out of the car, she felt vulnerable for the first time in years. There was nothing here to separate her from the people around her. It was a disquieting beginning. She found the cleaning job by chance, advertised on a bulletin board at a local bakery. Evelyn filled out the form with trembling hands, using the fictional name she had chosen to hide her identity. On the day of the interview, she felt the discomfort of being evaluated not for her wealth, but for her ability to clean and organize. "Do you have experience?" they asked. "Not officially," she replied, hoping the lie would hold. Her first day on the job was a rude awakening. The tight uniform, the strong smell of cleaning products, the physical exhaustion that seemed unending. Everything was new and overwhelming. Evelyn felt the weight of every task as a challenge to her old life. Yet, even as she scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans, part of her felt strangely alive. It was as if, for the first time, she was truly present. Her co-workers were another challenge. Some treated her with coldness, others with condescension. Evelyn noticed the suspicious glances and the hushed whispers about her lack of skill. She knew she wasn't welcome, but she understood she needed to earn her place. During breaks, she observed the others chatting in groups, laughing and sharing stories, while she sat alone, trying to figure out how to fit into this vastly different world. Still, there were moments of beauty in the simplicity. Like the day she helped a coworker carry heavy boxes and received a quiet thank you in return. Or when a child on the street smiled at her for no reason at all. These were small, almost imperceptible instances, but they began to nurture something inside her. Evelyn didn't know exactly what she was searching for, but she was starting to suspect the answers might lie in these subtle details. At night, in the tiny rented room, Evelyn replayed the events of the day. Her body ached, and her mind was clouded with confusion. She wondered if she had made a mistake. Perhaps it was too late to change, too late to find what she was looking for. But at the same time, something inside her insisted she keep going. Each challenge she faced seemed to bring her closer to discovering something important, even if she didn't yet know what it was. The neighborhood began to feel familiar, and Evelyn forced herself out of her comfort zone. She learned the names of people she passed every day, found where to buy the freshest bread, and started to understand the stories behind the simple facades of the houses around her. It was a world entirely unlike the one she had known, but gradually, she began to feel like she belonged to it. The transformation, however, was far from easy. Evelyn still carried the insecurities of someone who had spent her life on a pedestal. Every mistake at work, every judgmental look, seemed to amplify her doubts. Yet, at the same time, each small victory, a well-cleaned floor, a brief conversation with a coworker, was a triumph. Evelyn knew that crossing the threshold was only the beginning of her journey and that the real challenge was yet to come. As she prepared for another day of work, Evelyn had no idea that something was about to happen that would change everything. A twist that would shatter her assumptions and bring long-buried secrets to light. Her search for someone worthy of her fortune was about to take a turn she could never have anticipated. The job, already exhausting, became a true test of endurance when Evelyn suffered an accident. While cleaning a storage area, a wobbly shelf collapsed, and she slipped on the wet floor. The impact was immediate. Sitting on the ground, pain radiating from her ankle, she looked around for help. Her coworkers hesitated, their faces reflecting indifference, as if she were just another problem in an already grueling day. That was when Harper, a young clerk who worked nearby, knelt beside her. "Are you okay?" she asked with a kindness Evelyn hadn't expected. Harper, with her gentle eyes and steady hands, improvised a support so Evelyn could stand. Ignoring the disapproving stares of others, Harper escorted her to a nearby clinic, chatting all the way as if they had known each other for years. To Evelyn, this was more than kindness, it was a rarity. Harper became an unexpected ally. Though unaware of Evelyn's secrets, she treated her with warmth and dignity. Evelyn felt a mixture of gratitude and surprise. Harper had a light about her that seemed to brighten even the darkest corners of the neighborhood. "You're amazing, you know that?" Evelyn blurted out one day. Harper simply laughed, uncomfortable with the praise, as though she wasn't used to hearing it. Cole, Harper's father, was a more complex figure. When Harper insisted Evelyn come home to recover after the accident, Evelyn didn't expect to see a face she had never forgotten. Cole, her ex-boyfriend, stared at her with a mix of shock and mistrust. "Evelyn," he murmured, incredulous. For Evelyn, the reunion felt like opening a chest filled with memories she had tried to ignore for years. The past came rushing back with force. Evelyn and Cole hadn't parted on good terms. He had accused her of prioritizing money and ambition above all else. She, in turn, believed he would never understand her choices. Now, standing before him, Evelyn felt exposed in a way she hadn't in decades. Cole no longer seemed like the idealistic young man she had known, but rather a man hardened by life's challenges. Yet, there was something in his eyes that remained unchanged. Not everything, however, was so simple. While Harper and Cole began to feel like allies in her journey, Evelyn faced enemies as well. These weren't people, but circumstances. Her illness continued to advance, sapping her energy and testing her resolve. On top of that, there was the prejudice of some coworkers who treated her as an outsider. Evelyn knew she would need more strength than she thought possible to keep moving forward. The days turned into an emotional roller coaster. Evelyn swung between moments of genuine connection with Harper and uncomfortable confrontations with Cole. He seemed determined not to trust her, perhaps fearing she would disappear again. Evelyn understood his reasons, but the weight of his judgment was difficult to bear. Still, Harper acted as an anchor, keeping Evelyn grounded amidst the chaos. One evening, while they were talking in the kitchen, Harper revealed something that made Evelyn's heart skip a beat. "You know, my dad always talks about a woman he loved deeply. Someone he lost because of money." Evelyn turned away, feeling a lump in her throat. She knew Harper was talking about her. But how could she explain the choices that had led her to make so many mistakes? The lies of the past were becoming harder to ignore. Despite the challenges, Evelyn began to notice something she hadn't felt in a long time: a sense of belonging. It wasn't easy, but her time with Harper and Cole was helping her see life from a new perspective. Money, which had always been a barrier between her and others, now seemed insignificant. Evelyn was starting to understand that true wealth wasn't measured in numbers, but in the connections we build. Still, there was something Evelyn didn't yet know. Harper and Cole were keeping secrets of their own, ready to surface and change everything. Evelyn's journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun, and the twists awaiting her would be greater than any contract or fortune she had ever handled. Harper's house was small but full of life. Evelyn, sitting on a chair in the living room, observed the details around her: framed photos on the walls, simple vases with flowers, and the comforting smell of freshly baked bread. There was a harmony in that home that stood in stark contrast to the emptiness of her mansion. Harper seemed to be the soul of the house, filling every corner with her energy. For Evelyn, it was a new and unsettling world, but also one that brought a strange sense of comfort. Conversations with Harper became more frequent, and Evelyn started to open up, albeit carefully. One day, while helping Harper fold laundry, Evelyn let slip, "Sometimes life gives us more twists than we expect." Harper smiled, unaware of the weight behind those words. Evelyn was speaking of herself, but she didn't yet have the courage to reveal her secret. She knew that when the truth came out, nothing would be the same. The dynamic between Evelyn and Cole was more strained. He watched her with suspicion, as though waiting for her to make a mistake. Evelyn understood. After all, she had left him in the past, choosing a life of wealth and power over staying by his side. Now, as she looked at Cole, she saw not only the man he had become but also the marks left by time and hardship. One quiet evening, Cole finally broke the silence. "Why are you really here, Evelyn?" The question hit like an arrow, and Evelyn felt the weight of the lies she had been carrying. She hesitated, but before she could respond, Harper entered the room with a worried expression. "You both need to see this," she said, holding a medical report in her hands. Evelyn couldn't have imagined how much this moment would change everything. Harper explained that she had been feeling weak for some time but thought it was just exhaustion. However, the medical tests revealed something far more serious: a rare condition requiring an urgent transplant. Evelyn felt the ground slip away beneath her. She could hardly process the words as Cole silently held Harper close. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt true fear, not for herself, but for someone she had barely begun to know. The revelation that Harper was her biological daughter hit Evelyn like a tidal wave. Cole, after years of silence, finally admitted the truth he had been hiding. Evelyn was stunned. She had always believed she was incapable of having children, yet here she was, faced with a reality that unraveled everything she thought she knew about herself. Harper, vulnerable on the couch, looked at both of them with confusion and disbelief. "What are you saying?" she asked. The silence that followed was nearly unbearable. Evelyn didn't know how to explain something she barely understood herself. She felt the crushing weight of guilt as Harper tried to process the revelation. Cole, on the other hand, seemed torn between anger and relief. "I should have told you sooner," he admitted. But this wasn't a moment for regrets. Harper needed help, and Evelyn knew she would do whatever it took to save her. From that moment on, Evelyn felt a profound shift within herself. This was no longer just about finding someone worthy of her fortune. It was about rediscovering the bonds she never thought she had. Harper and Cole weren't just a lost family, they were her chance at redemption. Evelyn was ready to face any challenge, any sacrifice, to protect her daughter. But time was becoming her greatest enemy. As the days turned into a desperate race against the clock, Evelyn began planning her next steps. Medical consultations, evaluations, and an unrelenting search for answers. Yet another shocking truth was about to emerge. After a tense phone call, Cole revealed that Harper had a twin brother, Theo, who had been given up for adoption due to financial struggles. The news hit like a bombshell. Evelyn realized her journey was far from over. The search for Theo brought more questions than answers. Where was he? How was his health? And how would Harper react to discovering she wasn't alone in the world? Evelyn knew she was about to venture into even more uncharted territory, where the twists would be more intense and the decisions even harder. The past was finally demanding its price, and Evelyn would have to face it head-on. The phone sat silent, but Evelyn could hardly bear the waiting. After hours of investigation and a string of international calls, confirmation finally came. Theo was alive, but his situation was even more dire than Harper's. He lived in a remote town in South Africa, battling the same rare condition threatening his sister. The news brought relief and despair in equal measure. Finding him was only the beginning. Saving him would be the real challenge. Evelyn wasted no time. With her fortune still at her disposal, she organized a medical operation to bring Theo back. Passports, documents, special transportation, everything had to be arranged at breakneck speed. But the money that had so often solved her problems now felt like a limited tool. Bureaucracy was relentless, and the clock kept ticking. Evelyn felt the urgency pressing down on her like a weight on her chest. When she finally boarded the plane to South Africa, Evelyn knew she was risking more than just time. Her own health, already fragile, was being pushed aside. During the flight, her mind was torn between worry and hope. She imagined what meeting Theo would be like, how she would explain everything, and, most importantly, how to convince him to trust her. After all, to him, she was a complete stranger. The storm came as a final test, delaying the flight and leaving everyone aboard on edge. Evelyn, however, refused to let herself falter. Every minute of delay was a threat to Harper and Theo's lives, but she knew she had to stay calm. As the plane shook, she thought of all the decisions that had brought her to this moment. The woman she used to be would have given up. But this Evelyn didn't know the meaning of surrender. When they finally arrived in the small village where Theo lived, Evelyn froze upon seeing him for the first time. He was young, but time and illness had left deep marks on him. Despite that, there was a strength in his eyes that Evelyn immediately recognized, the same strength she saw in Harper. Theo, however, was wary. To him, Evelyn wasn't a savior but someone who could make an already complicated life even harder. With the help of Sophia, Theo's adoptive mother, Evelyn began to explain the situation. Sophia was a strong woman who had raised Theo with love and sacrifice. Evelyn felt a mix of gratitude and shame as she heard the stories of how he had faced so many adversities without the support of the mother who should have been there. But the focus now wasn't the past, it was the future, and Evelyn was determined to give both Theo and Harper a chance at life. The journey back was as tense as the one there. Theo, still weak, needed constant care, and Evelyn barely slept during the flight. Every small movement felt like a victory, but the fear that something might go wrong never left her. Upon landing, the medical team was already waiting for Theo, and Evelyn felt a spark of hope as she watched him being taken for evaluation. Yet, she knew the real battle was still ahead. Doctors quickly confirmed what Evelyn feared. Theo was a match to donate to Harper, but the surgery would be risky for both. What's more, Evelyn's weakened health made her an unlikely candidate for any procedure, but she insisted. "If there's anything I can do, I'll do it," she said with unwavering resolve. The decision to donate part of her own liver, despite the risks, came with immense emotional weight. The preparation for the surgery was an emotionally charged moment. Evelyn, Theo, and Harper lay side by side on hospital beds, connected not just by blood but by the choices they had made. Evelyn looked at the two young faces and felt an overwhelming wave of love she had never experienced before. They were her family, her redemption. Despite the fear, she knew she would do it all again if necessary. As the operating room lights glowed brightly, Evelyn closed her eyes and took a deep breath. There was a kind of peace in her decision, even with all the risks. She knew that no matter what happened, she had found something money could never buy: purpose. The supreme ordeal wasn't just about saving Harper and Theo, it was about saving herself, about finally becoming the woman she had always wanted to be. When Evelyn woke up after the surgery, the room was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines monitoring her vitals. Her body felt weak, every movement a struggle, but her first thought was, "Are they okay?" A nurse approached her with a reassuring smile and confirmed that both Harper and Theo had successfully made it through their surgeries. Evelyn felt a wave of relief that almost erased the pain coursing through her. The days that followed were a blend of physical recovery and emotional discoveries. Harper was the first to visit her, her eyes tired but shining with gratitude. "You saved my life," she said, gripping Evelyn's hand tightly. Evelyn tried to smile, but tears came first. For the first time, she felt truly connected to someone without any conditions or barriers. Theo took a little longer to come around. Perhaps it was the awkwardness of meeting a biological mother he barely knew. But when he finally entered Evelyn's room, his presence filled the space. He hesitated as if unsure of what to say. Evelyn, still weak, simply extended her hand. "Thank you for being so strong," she said softly. Theo held her gaze for a moment before smiling, a gesture that seemed to break years of invisible walls. Cole's visits were quieter but no less important. He helped her sit up, brought her flowers, and talked about little things to distract her from the pain. Evelyn felt that something had shifted between them. It wasn't the same love they once shared, but it was a new form of respect, a mutual acknowledgement of what they had endured together. Somehow, that felt enough. As Evelyn lay in the hospital, she began reflecting on the meaning of everything she had been through. The woman who had started this journey as a lonely billionaire now found herself surrounded by people who truly mattered. Harper and Theo weren't just her children. They were proof that life, with all its twists, could still surprise. Evelyn realized she had finally found something more valuable than money, a reason to keep fighting. Not everything was easy, though. Evelyn's recovery was slow, marked by setbacks and pain. There were days when her health seemed to regress, and the discomfort was nearly unbearable. But in those moments, Harper and Theo were always by her side, encouraging her, reminding her that it had all been worth it. Evelyn began to see that the physical sacrifice was just one part of the reward. The true elixir was the connection that now united her fragmented family. Sophia, Theo's adoptive mother, became an important figure in their growing family dynamic. Evelyn respected her deeply and made sure she knew it. "You were the mother I couldn't be for him," Evelyn once said, and Sophia responded with a calm smile. Together, they built a relationship rooted in mutual understanding. Evelyn knew she couldn't reclaim lost time, but she was determined to create a future where they could all coexist as a family, imperfect, but real. When Evelyn left the hospital, she decided it was time to change everything. She began selling the businesses that had once defined her life, channeling the profits into health and adoption foundations. "Money only has value when it's used for something bigger," she told Cole during an intimate conversation. He listened quietly, but his smile showed he understood how much this decision meant to her. Months passed, and Evelyn slowly regained her strength. Harper and Theo took turns helping her at home, and their evenings were filled with laughter and stories. Evelyn, for the first time, felt what it was like to be part of something greater than herself. It wasn't just about being a mother or a symbol of redemption, it was about living fully, finding joy in the little things. There was still much to rebuild, but Evelyn knew she had already achieved the most important thing. She looked at Harper and Theo with quiet pride, grateful for everything they had taught her about love and sacrifice. Her journey hadn't just saved their lives, it had saved her own as well. Returning to her mansion, Evelyn found it smaller than she remembered. The expansive corridors and crystal chandeliers that once symbolized success now seemed like relics of a life she had outgrown. But she didn't feel regret. Instead, she saw it as the beginning of something new. She was no longer the lonely, distant woman she had been. Harper and Theo were her family now, and the house, too large for one person, needed to be filled with life. The changes began almost immediately. Evelyn dismantled the luxurious office where she used to spend hours locked in meetings and transformed it into a space for Theo to paint, a passion he had always dreamed of pursuing but never had the chance. Harper chose one of the rooms to create a small music studio, a hobby she had always loved. For Evelyn, giving them these spaces was more than a material gesture. It was an invitation to make the mansion a home. Cole became a constant presence in their lives. Although there were still wounds that hadn't fully healed, he seemed more at ease around Evelyn. They didn't often talk about the past, but small, everyday gestures, a shared coffee in the morning, a quiet conversation in the afternoon, began to rebuild a bridge between them. Evelyn knew that reconciliation wasn't instant, but she was willing to give it the time it needed. Sophia, Theo's adoptive mother, was invited to be part of this new family dynamic. At first, she hesitated, worried about how Theo would adjust. But Evelyn insisted. "You'll always be part of his life," she said. Sophia eventually agreed, and the small dinner celebrating their union as a family became a memory Evelyn would treasure forever. Sitting at the table, surrounded by people who had once been worlds apart, she felt a happiness so genuine it brought tears to her eyes. The mansion underwent other transformations as well. Evelyn began donating the opulent furniture that no longer suited her new way of life. In their place, she brought in simpler, more comfortable pieces. The decor started to reflect who she was now, someone who valued stories and memories more than labels and price tags. Every corner of the house began to carry a personal touch, something Evelyn had never allowed herself before. Though united as a family, Evelyn knew there was still much to learn. Being a mother to Harper and Theo was a daily challenge, especially given their vastly different backgrounds. Evelyn devoted herself to understanding them deeply, listening to their stories, laughing at their jokes, and sharing moments she had never imagined having. These instances didn't erase the lost time but gave Evelyn a new chance to create precious memories. Evelyn's health showed signs of improvement over time. Although doctors remained cautious, she felt that the emotional strength from her family was aiding her recovery. She enrolled in an experimental program that promised to improve her quality of life. But more importantly, she realized she didn't need decades to feel fulfilled. The time she had now, even if limited, was enough because she was truly living. The businesses that had once consumed her every thought became a distant memory. Evelyn delegated all responsibilities, keeping only the oversight necessary to ensure the profits were directed to her foundations. She knew money couldn't buy happiness, but it could create opportunities for others to live fully. It was her way of giving back to the world. Evenings at the mansion became the highlight of her days. Harper played her guitar while Theo shared his artwork, and Sophia and Cole laughed over stories from the past. Evelyn watched it all with quiet pride and gratitude. These moments were her reward, her victory. She finally felt she was exactly where she was meant to be. The future no longer frightened her. She had the present, and that was everything. Evelyn began planning something special, a celebration that would bring together friends, family, and people touched by her foundations. An event to mark not just her transformation, but the transformations of those around her. She knew her journey was far from over, but she felt ready for anything. After all, the road back wasn't always straight. Sometimes, it was a dance full of twists, but in the end, every step was worth it. The event Evelyn had planned became more than just a celebration. It marked a turning point. The mansion, once synonymous with isolation and opulence, was now filled with voices, laughter, and shared stories. Every corner seemed alive, brimming with people whose lives had been touched by Evelyn's choices. Children helped by her foundations, families whose burdens were eased, and even former colleagues who came to honor her transformation. Yet for Evelyn, the real triumph was in the simplicity of the scene unfolding before her. At the heart of it all, Harper and Theo laughed together, sharing stories like siblings who had never been apart despite the years and miles between them. Sophia stood nearby, watching with pride, while Cole worked quietly in the kitchen, effortlessly stepping into the role of caretaker. Evelyn sat back, observing it all with a smile that hinted at her newfound peace. It was as if she had finally reconciled with her past and stepped fully into her present. But the road to this moment wasn't without struggle. Evelyn's health continued to fluctuate, with days when exhaustion and pain seemed insurmountable. Yet, each time she felt herself faltering, she thought of Harper and Theo. They were her anchor, her reason for pushing forward. This journey wasn't just about giving them life, it was about rediscovering her own. In their strength, she found her own. One particularly emotional moment came when Theo unveiled his first art exhibit, organized with Evelyn's support. He dedicated the show to "The Mother Who Found Me When I Didn't Know I Was Lost." The words brought Evelyn to tears, a rare moment of vulnerability for someone who had spent so much of her life guarded. For her, it wasn't just a tribute, it was proof that every sacrifice she'd made had been worth it. Harper, too, began using her newfound strength to help others. Inspired by Evelyn's generosity, she became a volunteer at a community health program, offering support to families navigating the same challenges she had faced. Evelyn watched her daughter with immense pride, seeing how Harper's journey of survival had turned her into a beacon of hope. Harper wasn't just living, she was thriving and creating change for others. Evelyn's resurrection wasn't just about what she gave to others, it was also about what she received. The quiet nights that had once felt oppressive were now moments of peace. She took up writing, not contracts or business memos, but reflections on her journey. These writings, she hoped, would one day be read by Harper and Theo. She wanted them to understand that even amidst mistakes and pain, there was always room for redemption. Her relationship with Cole also evolved. While the romantic spark they once shared was gone, they had built something deeper, a companionship rooted in mutual respect and shared experiences. Cole, who had always been practical, helped ground Evelyn, while she inspired him to dream again. Together, they found solace in each other's presence, proving that reconciliation could take many forms. Even the doctors, initially skeptical about Evelyn's recovery, began to notice her resilience. "You're a rare case," they said, impressed by her determination. Evelyn knew the experimental treatments helped, but she was certain that the love and support of her family were what truly sustained her. She wasn't merely surviving, she was thriving in ways she never thought possible. As the evening of the celebration came to an end, Evelyn slipped out into the garden. The sky was clear, the stars shining brighter than she had seen in years. Breathing in the cool night air, she smiled. For the first time, there was no emptiness, no regrets, no doubt. She had been reborn, not as the billionaire the world knew, but as someone finally at peace with herself and her choices. Evelyn's resurrection wasn't just physical, it was emotional and spiritual. She had reconnected with what truly mattered, with the people who filled her world and with herself. Evelyn understood that her true legacy wasn't in her fortune but in the lives she had transformed and the love she had found. Standing beneath the stars, she realized her work was only beginning. Evelyn, now fully recovered, didn't return to her old life but carried the lessons of her journey into a new one. The mansion, once transformed into a home full of life, became the foundation of something greater. Evelyn dedicated the next phase of her life to building a legacy beyond her wealth. She established a health and adoption foundation inspired by Harper and Theo's story, a way to turn her pain into purpose and give back to the world. The first projects launched with a renewed energy. Evelyn made a point to visit hospitals and shelters supported by her foundation, personally connecting with the people whose lives she helped improve. In one visit, a young mother in tears thanked Evelyn for the treatment that saved her child's life. Evelyn couldn't hold back her own tears. Each story reinforced her belief that this was where her wealth truly mattered. Harper and Theo became integral to the foundation's mission. Harper led wellness programs for young people recovering from illness, while Theo organized art workshops for vulnerable children. Evelyn watched them with pride, knowing that their stories of survival and growth were now inspiring others. They weren't just carrying her name, they were embodying the transformation she had worked so hard to achieve. The mansion itself evolved into a hub for community gatherings. Evelyn hosted dinners, bringing together friends, family, and even strangers who shared her vision. These events were simple yet deeply meaningful. "This house needs voices, laughter, and stories," she often said. For her, each new face was a reminder that the real value of her wealth lay in creating connections. But Evelyn knew that the elixir wasn't just what she gave to others, It was also what she had rediscovered in herself. The nights that had once been filled with oppressive silence were now moments of tranquility. She wrote about her experiences, capturing her mistakes, victories, and reflections. Evelyn hoped that one day Harper and Theo would read her words and understand the journey she had taken, not just for them but for herself. Her relationship with Cole deepened, becoming a steady and reliable presence in her life. It wasn't about rekindled romance but about a partnership built on mutual respect and shared goals. Evelyn admired Cole's grounded nature, while he found inspiration in her newfound purpose. Together, they navigated this new chapter, proving that redemption and reconciliation could take unexpected forms. Sophia, Theo's adoptive mother, became a vital part of their family dynamic. Evelyn made sure Sophia knew how much she valued her. "You were the mother I couldn't be for him," Evelyn told her one evening. Sophia, with her calm and steadfast demeanor, simply smiled. Together, they created a partnership that defied conventional ideas of family, proving that love transcends biology and circumstance. Evelyn's work began to gain recognition beyond her community. Invitations to speak at conferences and interviews poured in, not for her wealth, but for her story. She found herself talking openly about vulnerability, sacrifice, and the importance of purpose. For someone who had spent years hiding behind walls, this openness was both terrifying and liberating. And to her surprise, people listened. The day Evelyn inaugurated a community center named after Harper and Theo was one of the most emotional of her life. With both of them by her side and Sophia and Cole watching proudly, Evelyn gave a brief speech. "The journey is never about where we start, but about how we choose to walk it," she said. The words resonated deeply, capturing the essence of everything she had learned. Evelyn didn't see the return with the elixir as the end of her story but as the beginning of a new chapter. There was still much work to be done, many lives to impact. But now, Evelyn wasn't alone. She had a family, a mission, and most importantly, a heart that had finally found peace. Her true legacy wasn't in her wealth but in the transformation she chose to live and share with the world.